America, and welcome to the Happy Hour with Maestro Tim. I am said Maestro Tim, and I have a great guest with me today. Please join me in welcoming the director of the School of Music at the University of Iowa. Please say hello to Dr. Tammie Walker. Dr. Walker, how are you?
I'm doing great. Cheers to you, Tim.
Cheers to you. Now, as per your request, what are we drinking?
So we're having a French gimlet today to use up your bottle of Saint Germain that you've had way too long in your cupboard.
Indeed, I have.
So you have a little Saint Germain and some lime and some gin. And I see that you shook yours, which is much fancier. Mine is on ice.
Well, cheers to you.
So cheers.
Love it.
To Tuesday.
To Tuesday. Now, you did mention that I haven't been using my Saint Germain, so I'm going to bring my bottle into view. How about yours?
Mine is empty, Tim.
So clearly you had a harder year than I have. So
yeah, I need to borrow some from you.
So for our viewing audience, we're meeting for the very first time. You have been with the University of Iowa for a little bit over a year now, but you came here just in time for the pandemic hit. So instead of me going through your bio, why don't you give us a little bit about your background? It all started in Wisconsin, did it not?
It all started in Wisconsin, and don't hold that against me. You don't choose where you grow up, but here's my Wisconsin cup I'm using here.
From your accent, you've picked up the language fairly well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
A lot of classes. Yep. I grew up in Madison, Wisconsin, and was a proud member of the Wisconsin Youth Symphony Orchestra. Got to work with Marvin Rabin, got to work with James Smith in that group, got to work with Tom Buckhauser, and that honestly, not to get too serious here in the first 2 minutes, but that's the group that really set my course for music. Right. My high school orchestra director was, I play the violin. Dirty secret, I went to college on a violin scholarship. Wow,
you actually admit that publicly. Do you still do it, or only for cocktail parties and games? Yeah, good for you.
A lot's coming out in the first couple minutes, but had a wonderful high school program, very influential, great piano teachers, but it was WYSO, that Wisconsin Youth Symphony, that really just got me that bug that I haven't been able to shake since.
Let me stop you there, because you've actually tapped into kind of a theme that's been going on for the entire year that I've been doing this, and that's the importance of connecting with youth and feeding the fire while they're young. Because usually, if someone finds an interest in music by the time they're in high school or early college, it's not going to really work out for them. But when it's really something that, when you see that 5-year-old, that 10-year-old, that 12-year-old, that you can ignite that passion in. Talk a little bit more about the people who actually lit that fire into your belly.
Yeah, absolutely. It was not my first piano teacher. That was not the person that did it. There was a fear factor there.
Do you have still the scars on your knuckles?
There's still yes. There's emotional scarring as well.
Right.
But that was a short-lived relationship when I was in third grade. But it was really the high school, the junior high and high school orchestra directors, and then that experience in the youth symphony. I would say in 6th grade is when it really hit me like a ton of bricks, that I had the whole world exposed to me in terms of how insatiable studying music is.
What was it, music particularly, or the arts globally?
It was music particularly, and I don't have any musicians in my family, so this was a little bit odd. Both of my grandmothers were very, very musical, not trained musicians, but very musical, played by ear, and any instrument you put in front of them, that sort of raw talent. But my nuclear family was not a musical family, so the fact that I was so enthralled by all of that was really kind of amazing. And I have of course my parents were wildly supportive once they realized that was an interest, but my music teachers when I was young, those are the people that really made a huge impact on my life.
Did your parents get it immediately, or were they hands off and they said, "Oh, this seems to be an interest," or did they like pick up on this immediately and said, "Oh, our daughter wants to do this. I mean, how involved were this in this awakening, this epiphany for you?
Yeah, well, they definitely knew that I loved it, and I grew up with my parents telling me to stop practicing because it would just go on all the time, and
Right.
people were ready to go to sleep. But I always had good music teachers, and I had rides to where I needed to be, and it was uncharted territory for all of us. And there's something really beautiful about that. I mean,
Right.
my music teachers were kind of guiding us, like this would be a great next step, and this would be a good experience. All of it was unbeknownst to me, and my parents were not familiar either. So it was a pretty organic, natural progression that's still going. So
Right.
I'm still a student and learning every day, and that's why I just can't get out of higher ed. Frankly,
Yeah.
I just have that student spirit. I just need to be around those people.
I think people are really lucky if they are blessed with the right parents. I mean, there are some who are the stereotypical helicopter parents, and then there are those who just let their child sort of discover on their own, and they go along for the ride. Did you ever have that conversation of, piano is fine, but if you should think of a real career in fill in the blank, insurance or math or whatever. Did your parents actually have that conversation with you, or did they know better that she's sort of found her way?
Yeah, no, they did. They did. And again, that's part of that beautiful, natural, unscripted journey of, how does this work? How does one make a living in music? How does one get a job in music? And that was all a process, definitely. Yeah.
You know what? I'm gonna hold this here, and I'm gonna go into our chat room to see if anybody's watching. We usually have a lot of hardcore supporters here. Are you seeing any comments in our? No comments yet? All right. Well, those of you who are watching, make sure you sign off or at least sound out and tell us what you're drinking. I'm seeing a lot of thumbs up here, but I don't know what Mr. or Mrs. Thumbs are drinking, so I'm very curious what's going on there. Actually, it's a sign of the improving times. In the deep dark of winter, we would be roughly averaging about 1,200 people for this broadcast. And as people are becoming more and more vaccinated, which I encourage everybody to go out there and get vaccinated, people are discovering their own lives. So I'll be very curious to see how many people are watching. So please make sure you sign in and just say, hey, I'm drinking whatever. So we were talking about your parents, and that's, high school is one thing, and your formative years is one thing, but when you make the leap into higher education, and this is where you live, tell us about your personal story, and then we'll get into how that informs you in the profession that you're in now. So the decision to move on.
Yeah, absolutely. So I did my undergraduate degree at University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire, which is in the northwest part of the state. Pretty small to mid-sized school with a really good music program, in particular, a really strong jazz program that is still going strong decades after I was lucky enough to be there. And that was a really perfect environment for me. I mean, it was small enough that I had a lot of attention from teachers, and I had a lot of support from other students. I started the same year that we had a really amazing musical class. I mean, for some reason, several of the people in our group went off to professional orchestra jobs, principal bass of the San Francisco Symphony and principal cello in Cleveland. And I mean, just amazing orchestral careers. Mine, of course, not that. I played violin in the orchestra, but it quickly went in the case once I went to grad school.
Isn't that funny? Because sometimes your peers are actually what, I mean, the institution is one thing, but the class that you belong to is also very formative in your own development.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It was an inspiring time. And I still feel that way. It sounds very cheesy, Tim, but to be surrounded by people that are like you is absolutely thrilling. And I felt that way when I went to college, and it overwhelmed me in my first month. realizing I'm doing music during the day and music classes, and I practice during the day before 4 p.m. in the afternoon. And with all these other people that had been living this parallel life of, being music nerds in high school, and there we all were together. And I still feel that same way, like my people, the folks that I understand and want to talk to and be around. So that was a highly impactful 4 years.
Yeah. How has that informed you on who you are today? Because I always think that the big transitions in any person's life is from high school to university, and then university into whatever career or whatever professional life they're going to have. So how did that inform you now that you're looking on the other end of it?
Yeah, it absolutely informed the way that I look at my job and have looked at my job for the past 20 some years, especially in the way that I associate and want to support our incoming new students, our freshmen, the conversations I want to have with their parents, and the sort of opportunities I want to give them. I mean, it is absolutely reminded me that that is a critical time, and it's kind of a make or break time, that freshman, sophomore year of college.
Yeah.
And going either direction is perfectly fine. I mean, having it be known without shadow of a doubt that, yes, I am doing what I should do. I'm in music, I'm all in. Or the opposite, saying, nope, this was great in high school, but I don't think this is what I want to do. Either one of those paths really happen in that, 2-3 year period at the beginning of college. And so I'm aware of that all the time, especially every fall, and take that very seriously, and being available to students and being open to having those tough conversations.
Let me put you on the spot here. So as a student, what was it that you wish you had that now you're in the position where you can give the student body?
I would say I wish I had more performing experiences my first 2 years.
Yeah.
Even though I was at a smaller school, I still feel like the really high profile performances and opportunities and special showcase events and things were really held at a level for the upperclassmen.
Yep.
For the junior, seniors, and the graduate students. So if I could go back and fix that, I would. And that's something, again, here at Iowa, I'm very, very aware of. And I think we do a pretty good job, even for the size of our school, which is larger than the school I did my undergraduate at. We do a good job of getting people those performance opportunities, just so you can get the experience and get the grit that you need and the comfort that you need. I think from the beginning, it's easier to do it when you're younger and you don't have all of the voices in your head that you get later.
Right. So you've always had some Hawkeye DNA in you, and you didn't realize that at the time. So after you went from Eau Claire, you went to where?
I went to the University of Illinois, and I did a master's and a doctorate in piano performance at the University of Illinois. I studied with Ian Hobson, who's not there anymore. But when I was there, he had a really large studio, and I still look at that and wonder how he managed his performing career. And
probably a lot of this.
I think so. I don't know. He just, I honestly, I still, I have so much respect for not just the teaching I received from him, but just the example that he set in terms of the ultimate juggling act.
Right.
That he pulled off at a high level.
Right.
And Champaign-Urbana is kind of a sister or a brother to Iowa. I mean, very similar in size and scope.
But it's even more than that. You knew, or was Don Moses was there when you were studying. Now Don Moses was an icon at Iowa, because great choral program, and as a matter of fact, I got my first conducting opportunities with him just as he was going from Iowa to Champaign-Urbana. So I have a lot of fond memories of Don Moses. So who knew that here you are in Wisconsin and here I am in Canada, and we're being sort of like we're getting that Hawkeye sort of vibe going on. So talk about this juggling act that you just said about your teacher. It's a luxury when you're a student, when you can spend your waking hours, learning about the finer parts of the art and debating certain things and learning new things. But there is a juggling act that you have to prepare your students for. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, well, every music student is a double major. They come into the university being a double major. We talk about that a lot with the incoming freshmen. The fact that they went to high school, in most cases, school during the day, and then juggled their other life, their music life, which was in the evenings and on the weekends. So I think musicians have a lot of that time management commitment.
Right.
Coming into college. Same with sports. I mean, it's an absolute parallel. The students that excel in sports, that have managed those practices and those workouts before and after school in their high school days, I mean, they're really set up for a lot of life skills beyond just doing well in their classes. But yeah, that's something that we talk really honestly with our students about, again, especially those freshmen and sophomores, about, hey, your schedule looks really different than it did when you're in high school. There's
Right.
blank space on your calendar. So it might look like this is going to be easier than high school, but what's different is that self-motivated time that's taken in high school that's taken in college that you don't always have in high school. There's the amount of studying and practice that has to get done.
Well, I think it's life in general, but for musicians in particular, it means being on the ready no matter what time it is. Everyone is clocking off at work at 5 o'clock. Musicians are just going to work. Or they're in schools playing to elementary school students at 9 o'clock in the morning. In other words, the work is not 9 to 5, it's whenever it is. And so I always admire musicians because they are put in a position where they have to be incredibly flexible. Hold that thought. I'm going to go back to our chat room to see what's going on here. Here we go. Susan Anderson, margaritas at Hacienda. Wonderful. God love it. Mike Kvach, hello, a nice cold Stone Hazy IPA. Excellent. See, as soon as I asked our viewing audience what they're drinking, now they chime in. It says more about them than me, I think. I don't know. What do you think, Ed? Really? You really? Okay. Randy Reynolds, hello, he's drinking Canadian tonight. Yes, my dad was not happy with me taking my bassoon scholarship at Indiana University. Randy, did we have this conversation before? Because I too am a Hoosier, an IU alum. Nancy Saradak says, love these happy hours, and yes, I do have a life. My drink of choice is red wine, a garnacha, wonderful. And Bunny Tomes, Stella Summer Solstice, wonderful. Thank you so much for saying hello. And please enter in any questions you might have of Dr. Walker, and I'll be sure to pass them on to you. So earlier you're talking about this magical time in which you're with a class of colleagues and peers who probably were just as instrumental in your education as the actual formal curriculum. And you were talking about a jazz program that's been going on strong for years. How much of that is generated from the person, and how much of that is generated by the institution? It's one thing to build a program, it's another thing to sustain it.
Yeah, absolutely. I can talk about UW-Eau Claire, and I can talk about Iowa too.
Both. Yep.
Yeah, it is a balance of both, and that's a really excellent question. You have to have the personnel in place to pull it off. It's not enough to throw resources at something like that. Excuse me. So in Eau Claire, that person was Bob Baca. He's still there. He's a trumpet player. He built the program with a vision for it to be recognized across the country, and he has pulled it off for many years. At Iowa, Damani Phillips is our director of jazz studies. And he
you got the big double fist pump from Ed. We love Damani. Yeah.
Damani is the real deal.
Yeah,
and you have to have that set up first, your personnel, and then you need to have the administrative support, both in terms of helping to guide, but giving space and resources, of course. And the biggest resource is people. And at the University of Iowa, we've made 2 hires in the jazz area since I've been here. The first one was William Menefield, jazz piano, and then we hired Curtis Taylor, a jazz trumpet player who's going to join us in the fall. So we're getting all those really critical building blocks in place with the people, and it's going to be something to watch. We are really, really excited.
So you were at Western Illinois for like 20 some years. So what made you start beating your head against the wall and get into the administrative side of things? I mean, that is a total different animal. Speaking of juggling, as well as keeping up with your teaching and performing duties, how did that come about? I mean, why did you actually want to add those headaches onto your life?
I don't think anybody wants to add headaches, so I'm not going to be answering that. But yeah, going into it with your eyes wide open is certainly true. I was at Western Illinois University for 21 years, and the first 17 of those I was strictly on the piano faculty, and taught piano students and piano literature. I taught music history for a couple of years and theory for a year, and just the usual courses. Our department chair at WIU passed away unexpectedly. And I mean, I think that school will never recover. I mean, it was in the middle of a fall semester. He died in October, healthy guy, just kind of out of the blue. And then our dean surveyed the faculty and said, who would we like to get us through the next 8 to 10 months until we can get a replacement in? And my colleagues must have had something against me because they put my name forward. And
did they put your name forward, or did they pull their names back?
Both. Probably both. There was a lot of, pushing someone in the front and ducking. Right?
I've seen that with penguins, actually, where they like jostle until one of them falls over into the ocean. Okay, yeah, so you're the victim. Good for you. Okay.
I was the penguin in the front. That's right. And so I was reluctant to take the position just because of the headaches that you mentioned. But I believed in the department and in the work that we were doing and said, I will do it. But, I want to see an end date on that contract before I sign it. And that end date was there. And did the job for a few months and got an incredible amount of enjoyment out of it, in the sense that it was so completely different and so completely new. And I had so much to learn. Right. That I kind of felt like I did when I was that student back at Eau Claire, just overwhelmed with, wow, this is a much bigger world than I realized, way more than I realized. I'd been in the piano lane for 17 years. So the department did a national search and the job was posted, and I walked into the dean's office and told him, sit down, I'm going to apply for the job. He couldn't believe it, because this is the same woman that had said, I want to see that end date, because I got, you got me for half a year and that'll be it. And so he said, okay, absolutely. So I applied for the job like everyone else, and they put me through the same schedule and Skype meetings. Actually, we did Skype meetings, not Zoom meetings. And then the rest is history. I got the position, and again, I still am so motivated by all the work that can be accomplished. And I'm so incredibly satisfied and gratified by that behind the scenes work at this point in my life, and putting other penguins in front of me in a good way. In a good, and I get so much enjoyment out of lifting up other people and watching things happen and knowing what was happening behind the scenes, like the Wizard of Oz, but having others maybe not be aware of it, like I was. I think I had a really good department chairs when I was a faculty member, because I really had no idea what kind of advocacy and work was happening behind the scenes. And so I'm really enjoying the pace and the steep learning curve, and all the work that there is to be done. It's relentless. I mean, there's no such thing as an empty inbox and nothing on the to-do list. And that's really motivating for me at this point, honestly.
I'm going to go back into our chat room, but when I come back, I'm going to ask you what are the parallels and differences between unlocking the potential of a student and unlocking the potential of faculty? Because I'm sure there are similarities, there are differences, but you are now charged with both. So let's see what's going on in our chat room. Summer solstice, yeah, Bunny already said, yeah. Marianne Weiss says, nice to meet you, Tammie Walker. This is one reason I love happy hour. Sipping a blue crush. Sipping a blue crush. I like that. Oh, by the way, to our viewing audience, I want to actually get your attention for this. So June 1st is going to be my last happy hour. And it's going to be Orchestra Iowa's very first live event. And in Opus, we can only fit right now about 30 people with city and government restrictions. So I made this announcement last week, and we had about 10 people sign up. So if you are interested in coming down and witnessing and viewing our last happy hour in person, I want you to write to Orchestra Iowa, tickets at orchestraiowa.org. Once again, that's tickets at orchestraiowa.org, and just say happy hour and say, hey, I want to attend. And if you have a +1, all we need to know is your RSVP, so we know how many people to expect. So get online now, or as soon as we sign off. I hope to see you live on Tuesday, June 1st at 5 o'clock. Oh, got a new one. Steve West. Have you heard of Steve West before, Ed? Steve? No? No? The name sort of rings a bell, but Tammie, a great addition to Iowa, and for music education, we keep taking the best from Illinois, including our new president at Iowa. Amen. Love Steve. So, hey, Steve.
This is for Steve.
Yeah, I'll drink to that. And Steve, by the way, get online, tickets at orchestraiowa.org. I want you here because what I'm going to be doing is we're going to be all drinking in person, and I'm going to have past guests either in person or zooming in just randomly to the toast. It'll actually be a brutal drinking game because every 5 minutes we'll be toasting. So, hey, that's why I love the end of the pandemic. So, the future. So the differences and the similarities between getting the best out of your students, plumbing their potential, and now you also have a department and faculty to manage, and that also means inspiring the best out of them. Your turn.
Yeah, I would say there are some similarities, but there's also some pretty significant differences.
Sure.
With students, of course, there is always the carrot or the clarity of degree requirements and passing classes.
Yep. Check. Yep.
That's right. Checking boxes and procedure and policy and precedent, and all of that is crystal clear when you're a student. That said, we remind students often that you're no longer in-state mandated preschool through 12 education. This is not, you don't have to be here, so this is still a choice, and so you should feel good about that choice while you're in college. With faculty, I think that there is I think trust is part of it. I think faculty need to know that their administrators believe in their work and want their best selves for all the right reasons. I think that as much as possible, like I mentioned before, lifting up faculty, recognizing what their strengths are and championing that privately and publicly with them, I think is an incredible motivator. Everybody in these positions won their job fair and square, and they have something to bring to the table that is something that we really want and something we really need. So I think keeping them in that mindset and in that place of sharing is really, really important. And all in all, I can't emphasize this enough, but community is so important for student success and for faculty success. We run into trouble when people get isolated. And we've learned that a lot this past year as a nation. But this has been front and center on our radar this year with our students. first of all, keeping them healthy and mentally healthy and physically healthy, but also with our faculty, and just, trying to foster that team spirit and that sense of working together. We're so much stronger when we're all working in the same direction.
Right.
So that's a really, really huge part of my job, I think,
Right.
is just keeping that sense of community healthy and letting everybody feel valued and know where they fit on the team, and how much we need them, and that can inspire them to do their best work.
Talk a little bit about innovation, but first, Ed, my cocktail is coming down, and I'm kind of busy right now. Would you mind just like mixing me another cocktail, and and we look forward to hearing the sound of shaking ice in the distance.
I can't do that.
I love having people. I know you're out. You're out. So. This is what I find so exciting about what you do, because there's one thing about hiring or having a faculty that has a fixed sort of job description. I teach piano, I teach violin, I teach bassoon. But once you get to know these people, none of us are one-dimensional. You'll find that certain people have different talents. And are you in the point of like evaluating, not in the terms of like evaluating, but looking at the person and building new programs around these people who might have different skills? I mean, you might have a certain faculty member who is a great public speaker, or has certain insight on injuries or the like. Because I sometimes wonder that music schools atrophy because they are hiring for a pigeonholed position, and yet they're not taking advantage of the person that they ultimately hire.
Absolutely. Yes, that's a very wise way of looking at things. We had several searches this year. We actually have 7 new faculty members joining us in the fall, if you can believe it.
That's big. Yes. Yep.
Big. 5 of those searches are finished, and 2 of them are in progress. In almost all of those cases, I say almost all because a couple of them we didn't have the room for this, but we purposefully left parts of the job descriptions open so we can see what people are bringing to the table. So they're coming in for a skill. For example, I'll give our horn search as one example. We just wrapped that up last week and announced yesterday who our hire is. Dr. Katie Ambrose is joining.
Wonderful. That's news to me and most of our viewing audience. That's huge. That's great. Yeah. I love Jeff Agrell, who is retiring. Wonderful person. But
yeah, absolutely. And sidebar, we had
listen to this.
You're a brave man.
Can you hear this? Can you hear that? Can you hear the pouring of the gin? That's right. Okay. You see, like magic. You don't see it.
Amazing.
Okay. Exactly. Okay. So, sorry. Continue.
Incredible resources you have there. That's great.
Jesus, Anna, you trying to kill me? Oh my God.
Too much?
No, it's perfect.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I was just saying, sidebar, we had our last faculty meeting of the academic year today. So we had to say goodbye, sadly, in a Zoom meeting to all the people that are retiring, and there are many of them. But the example I was giving with our horn hire, purposefully, we left the job description kind of open. So obviously we need this person to teach the horn, clearly, right. and to play in the Iowa Brass Quintet, and to recruit, and all the things that we need a horn professor to do. But we wanted to see what this person could bring to the table and what we can tap into for extra course assignments and extra directions and things. So I look forward to, with all the new people, especially that are coming in, to really learning about them and seeing how they can add to the curriculum. I think it's absolutely going to be thrilling. And again, giving them the space to do that, to try new things. And I mean, as long as they're within NASM guidelines and we don't go off the rails completely, right. We have a lot more flexibility in music schools than people want to admit. I think it's easy to do the same thing year after year after year, because that's just the way that things are done. But we have, university music programs actually have a ton of flexibility.
Right.
You just got to, again, it's part of having that community and that team understand what the big picture is and how they can be part of that change and buy in to that change and be part of the solution. It's a little bit like, moving the Titanic as opposed to a sailboat.
Oh, yeah.
It takes a lot of force to make a sharp turn, but it absolutely can be done. It's exciting to watch.
I'm going to check a chat room to see if there are any questions for you, and I'll come back talking about the future is now. We've all been through this pandemic, and I'm sure you've gone through incredible contortions just to get this far. But I'm sure it has implications about next year, next week, next decade. And I'll come back with that as soon as I check out to see if there's any questions for you. Let's see here. Gary Wickland, drinking scotch, Green Label, always a fun time. Amen, Gary. Next time, when we see each other in person, I expect a bottle of blue in your hands, and I'll be happy to accept. We call that a donation. Yeah. Okay, that's all that's going on there. So let's go back. As I was about to say, the future is now. Tell us a little bit about this past year that you've endured, some of the crazy things that you've had to do just to open up. And even though they may be crazy today, they're going to have implications tomorrow and the next year and for a decade to come. So we can both talk about last year and the future.
Yeah. Oh, you got it. Last year brought unbelievable challenges to the arts. I don't need to talk to this group about that. In many ways, it was devastating to the mission. And in other ways, it opened up our eyes to things that we have not had to look at before. And at the University of Iowa, we were faced with really tough decisions in the spring of 2020. Things were quote unquote easy, and that the university said we're 100% online. That's it. There was absolutely no wiggle room there. That was an unbelievable challenge. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
In 2 weeks' time, we had to pivot the entire School of Music to a 100% online format. Incredibly challenging. At the same time, there was a ton of clarity with that. Like, that is what you must do. And this is the date on that Monday morning at 8 that your first online class needs to be up and running. We used last summer to navigate what was not as clear, which is how do we return in the fall? Right. Once we all came to terms with the fact that this wasn't going to be over in 6 weeks.
Even worse than that, I mean, people were still sort of humming and hawing, and all of a sudden it was like July, August, and it's like, we still have no plan. Yeah.
Right, absolutely. So right away, I learned very quickly that I needed to surround myself with people that knew what was going on, because that person was not me. I am not a bioaerosol scientist. I am not an engineer. I am not a facilities management expert. And so we have incredible resources, personnel resources at the University of Iowa. And so we tapped into that. We partnered with medical professionals and partnered with bioaerosol scientists and our facilities management team and the architects that built the building, the engineering firm in Cedar Rapids that designed our HVAC system. We got all those people together and learned not only how do aerosols behave coming out of musical instruments and human voice, but how do they behave in our building? And how are we going to get our students back in there safely in the fall? And it was incredible work, Tim. I mean, it was exhausting and terrifying, but it was exhilarating also, the amount that we learned, and we were able to share, frankly, with the nation. NASM, our accreditor, has tapped into our research on more than one occasion and had our team give webinars to music schools across the country. I mean, it just opened up incredible amount of knowledge. And those people that we worked together so closely with last summer, who I now call very close friends. I was spending more time with them than my family last summer many times, sadly, but we're working on other projects now. I mean, we formed these relationships that if it was not for the pandemic, this is my point, those relationships would not be there. Right. I would not have friends that are otolaryngologists. That wasn't going to be a situation that was going to happen. But Now we're working on a musician's health clinic as a result, and a student hearing testing program as a result. And wonderful things came out of it. As cruel as that can sound, there was a lot of loss and grief and all kinds of things in the past year, but beautiful relationships were formed that would not have been formed had the pandemic not happened.
So just reading what you were just saying, so let's talk about the future. Future as you see 10, 15, 20, because I'm in the trenches where things change daily. What was expected of me as a professional 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, 20 years ago don't apply today. So what does that mean for your program? Does that mean more music and medicine, for example, if you're talking about audiology and respiratory research and the like? Is that one aspect of what you're looking for in the future? And you know, if you were to shake your magic 8-ball and look into the future, where does the University of Iowa need to be in terms of its music school?
Yeah, well, I wish I had an 8-ball on the one hand, but on the other hand, I don't, because it's
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm so glad, Tim, that I did not know how long the pandemic was going to last.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would have had the stamina to stay positive. So, you know,
Got
sometimes ignorance is bliss, but and it's motivating to not know how it's going to end. But absolutely, collaborative work is where it's at. So we learned that 60% of our undergraduate students are currently double majors, which is data we didn't have, but we dug in this past year just to see where we're at. Yeah.
Hold that thought. Double majors. Any particular statistic jump out at you, like our science majors, medical majors? I've always thought that there was a link between music and science, but that's my own anecdotal thing. Have you noticed that if there's a particular program that seems to tap into music?
Yep. We gathered all that info, and it's the two that you talked about. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Medicine is our number one double major with our music students.
Yep.
And the sciences, a close second, and psychology also quite near the top. Engineering also quite near the top. Interesting. Yeah. So we are we're running full speed ahead with that knowledge. We have an incredible teaching hospital here, and again, these relationships we formed just in the past year that are really rock solid in terms of getting things done. We're going to capitalize on all of that. We are really poised for creating curriculum and an experience that's really practical and flexible. And the pandemic taught us that as well. So I made the comment about how it's kind of like moving a Titanic versus a sailboat in a big music school. But we learned how quickly we actually can turn. I mean, we moved to online in 2 weeks' time.
That's stunning, actually. That's amazing. Yeah.
The whole country did. I mean, this isn't just an Iowa celebration. It's the country that did this. But I think it's given us a lot of courage in terms of trying new things. And we're committed to that sort of currency, and flexibility is a big part of being current, that ability to think on your feet and pivot where you need to. And we're just going to continue to instill that in our students. And we're looking at our curriculum really seriously and finding the places that we need to adjust and add and take away, so that we're making sure our students have that space to have that entrepreneurial spirit while they're in college, because they're going to need it in this.
Amen about the entrepreneurial spirit. I remember when I was in school, people would say, well, I'll go out and I'll get this position, or there's a job waiting out for me. And yes or no. But the truly successful of us were the ones who went out who didn't get a job and built a career on their own. And the whole idea of using what we do and reinventing it to make it like, it becomes more relevant to what we do. It makes Beethoven more relevant if you can actually put it into a new context. And that's where the entrepreneurial spirit comes. Listen, if you'll stick around after we sign off, this is wonderful. What a great way to meet you. Oh my goodness. first of all, with a cocktail. This conversation could go on for hours, and I'll probably have to have you back so we can continue this conversation. Can you please stay on the line as I sign off to our viewers? But there's a couple things I want to say that's coming up for our. There's a couple things here you might want to know here. Let's see here. Nancy Saraduck said, great to meet Dr. Walker and looking forward to seeing her and the faculty and the students in the fall. I so missed student recitals. John Schultz, also an alum from the University of Iowa. Really appreciate the perspective to take the storm of lemons this year has brought and making lemonade out of it. Randy Reynolds says, really enjoyed this discussion. Thank you. So with that, to our viewing audience, we're going to have First Friday, our usual our jazz performance. So if you want to log on at 5 o'clock on Friday, First Friday Jazz is going to feature the great Kevin Burt, one of my favorite artists. And you'll be able to see it streamed on Orchestra Iowa on our Facebook page here, or you can hear it simulcast on KCCK on that ancient technology called radio. June 1st, remember, reserve that and call into Orchestra Iowa at tickets@orchestraiowa.org to reserve your spot and your significant other to attend my final happy hour on June 1st at 5 o'clock, in which I'll have past guests here in person or phoning in every once in a while. Hope that you'll join us. And next week on Happy Hour, my old boss, Michael Stern, music director of Orchestra Iowa, also the son of famed violinist Isaac Stern, will be my guest.
Kansas City.
What did I say? Oh, did I say Orchestra Iowa? Well, it's either the cocktail or my ego talking. Yeah, so it's Michael Stern, music director of the Kansas City Symphony, which is not as good as Orchestra Iowa, which was what I really wanted to say. And he'll be online, and we're going to talk about music and the pandemic and cocktails and the making of pastrami. So you don't want to miss that as well. So with that, Tammie, thank you so much for saying yes. It was a delight to have you, and I look forward to picking up this conversation either in this format or even better in person. So with that, let's take us out, Ed. See you next week. Cheers.